Okay, let's dive into a court case that asks a pretty powerful question. Where does family end and property begin? We're talking about a legal saga that pits a daughter-in-law against your father-in-law with the family home right in the middle of it all.
So, back in 2016, a high court in India dropped this bombshell of a ruling. And it absolutely sent shockwaves through legal circles. Why? Well, because it seemed to challenge the very foundation of a joint family home, which is just a cornerstone of society in India.
You can imagine this decision created a huge stir. So, to really get why the court ruled this way, and more importantly, what happened next, we need to go back and meet the family at the very heart of this case.
Right, because this wasn't just about some abstract legal idea. Nope, this was about real people, a real house, and a family that was, well, completely falling apart. So let's meet the key players. On one side, you've got Jitender Kumar. He's a retired naval officer, and critically, he's the sole owner of the house. On the other side is his daughter-in-law, Varinder Kaur, who's living on the first floor with her young daughter. And kind of caught in the middle is the son, Arundeep, who is already estranged from his wife and had moved out.
So how did it all go so wrong? Well, this timeline really tells the story. It starts with a marriage in 2001, but just 4 years later, there's a dowry harassment case. They reconcile, and she moves into her father-in-law's house. But you can see the dynamic just completely fractures, and it all blows up in 2014 with both sides filing lawsuits.
And this brings us right to the core of the legal fight. The whole case really, from the lowest court all the way to the high court, it ended up hinging on the legal definition of just one crucial term.
And that term was shared household. Now, under a 2005 law, it's defined pretty broadly. It's basically a place where the person has lived in a domestic relationship and, get this, irrespective of who actually owns it. That last part, that little clause, became the entire point of conflict.
So you've got these two totally different arguments, right? On her side, she's saying, look, the law's written this way for a reason, to protect women. But on his side, he's arguing, hang on, this is my property. My son has no claim to it, he doesn't even live here, so my rights as the owner should be absolute.
So how did the court handle this clash? Let's jump into that 2016 verdict and see how they settled the debate, at least for the time being. The court sided pretty decisively with the father-in-law, and their logic was actually pretty straightforward. First, they established the house was his own property, not family property. Second, the husband had zero legal share in it, so the court's conclusion? A wife's right to live somewhere comes from her husband. If he has no rights to a place, then neither does she. Simple as that. Now, you might think the court just came up with this out of nowhere, but nope. They were following a really important precedent from the Supreme Court back in 2007 called S.R. Batra. And in that case, the court basically warned that if shared household was defined too broadly, it would cause chaos, turning every relative's home into a potential legal battleground. So they drew a hard line, prioritizing property ownership.
So for years, that 2016 ruling was a really powerful statement on property rights. It was clear, it was restrictive, case closed, right? Well, not so fast. The story doesn't end there.
I mean, just think about that. For 14 years, from 2007 on, that Batra decision was the law of the land. It meant that in these kinds of disputes, the person holding the title deed, they almost always won.
But then, something happened. A new case with a very similar story made its way all the way to the Supreme Court, and it forced India's top judges to take a hard look at the very definition of a family home all over again. And that case was Satish Ahuja versus Sneha Ahuja, a case that would completely, and I mean completely, rewrite the rules of the game. Look at this comparison. It's a total 180. In this 2021 Ahuja ruling, the Supreme Court straight up said that the old Batra interpretation was flawed. They ruled that what really matters is the lived reality of a domestic relationship. A woman's right to shelter isn't just tied to what her husband owns. It can actually exist on its own. So, what does this legal U-turn actually mean for families in India today? What's the big takeaway from this whole legal roller coaster? Well, you can really see this evolution in 3 clear steps. It's like a 3-act play. Act 1, back in 2007, was all about property rights being king. Act 2 is cases like Varinder Kaur's in 2016, where that logic was applied very strictly. But then, Act 3, the 2021 Ahuja ruling, the focus shifted to a more flexible view that puts the social reality of family life ahead of a strict property deed.
And that's the real key here, isn't it? The law isn't set in stone. It's a living thing. The verdict in Varinder Kaur's case was actually correct based on the law at the time, but the law itself changed.
It's now catching up with the messy, complex realities of modern families, where a house is so much more than just an asset on a piece of paper. It's a home.
And this leaves all of us with a really big and frankly tough question. This tension between property rights and protecting vulnerable people, it's not going away. It's a fundamental challenge that our courts and our society are going to have to keep grappling with for a long, long time.